Hey there. So, I'm going to try to talk over this one, get to some of the questions I've been getting. Uh, Real quick, it's an alkyd piece. Actually, the dark color on the palette there is oil, but the rest are alkyds. The colors really aren't important. I think it's a raw umber and a burnt sienna and a white of some sort. It's on a toned acrylic ground, and I'm just going to put some turpentine or terpenoid and a tiny bit of liquid on, because it'll be a sort of a wet surface to work on top of. And the acrylic is dry, so it's a nice. It's darker than I typically like to work, but it just came out that way. So I'm going to try to leverage that as I paint, and use that as sort of my darkest dark. As far as painting on a dark ground, it's it's really old, very traditional process. It's easier to paint up to light than it is for me to paint down to dark, especially if you're not using reference like this. You're able to sort of build form like light works, in an additive manner. Here I'm mixing sort of a warm and a cool range of values, just so I have a little temperature mix. I think it kind of erodes over time, and I sort of lose that. But it is much more dramatic than it looks like on this video in real life. I typically, make these little islands of color just because it's easier to reach over and grab a certain range. I try to keep them pretty separate, so I have a few levels to reach back for. But, I end up never using one or two of them anyway. So I'm trying to mix something to get down here on the surface as sort of middle dark, or middle, mid-value, and sort of add up from there, start dark and get up to my lights. And this ends up being too bright, but I got to get it down there to see. I think I end up something like that, somewhere in that range. And so I want to sort of establish my light direction now by hitting the sort of the front and the top facing planes with some of this color, knowing that I'm going to come way up from here as I add light in, or as I turn up the lights. This is sort of like me still deciding, and I went with my sort of typical light setup here because it's fast and it's easy, and I'm familiar with it. And that's the other thing is, painting without reference. For me, that was sort of I didn't really realize that was possible for a long time. I was such a slave to reference. And I'm glad for that time, because I really learned a lot about painting that way. I didn't have to concentrate on certain things. But at the same time, I'm glad that I pushed past it. And I would encourage people to, really give it a shot. Keep your light set up real simple at first. Do lots of different stuff with the same light. It doesn't really matter what you pick. I think the easiest light is really sort of like if the bulb were right above your head somewhere, say 10 feet above your head. And that's sort of this setup as well. There's less confusion about where the specular highlight should be on a surface, and it's good. It's a great way to show volume, that kind of light setup, and it's very simple. And once you sort of do 100 paintings, with that light and an understanding of how light works from that direction, then start to shift it around so that you're more comfortable. So you get comfortable with the different light setups, and then after that, it quickly becomes easy to just understand what a surface is going to look like. So I'm really just trying to carve out the planes here, and those facing the light more directly are going to get brighter lights. It really is kind of that simple at this point. You could see like the cheekbone here, where I haven't really gone in there, is catching the most light. The top of the nasolabial fold, the top of the lip, the bottom lip where it's curled into to the mouth, and the top plane of the chin. And I'm keeping them real basic there. There's no reason to get finicky at this point. Even if you were going to make some photorealistic rendering, at this point, there's no reason to get careful. So I'm trying to get a darker bulb on the nose, even though it's getting more light. There's more complicated things going on. It's also important, and this is one critique I seem to give out a lot, is that even once you understand and you'll see me do it several times here, is get caught up in the detail of the patterns of light here, not remembering that, although I'm trying to depict a forehead and this little light shape on the forehead, but that the forehead itself is a large shape. The head itself is a big cylinder here, and I need to be thinking about, instead of just the details, how light is falling off on the big shape. I'm trying not to do too much without getting new paint on the brush. So, I know there are some people that advocate, no more than one stroke without investing, the brush back in. I'm not that obsessive about it, but it's like every second or third. And if I put it down again, it's because I know that I didn't, take much paint off the brush, or because I want a slightly darker stroke and I know there's less paint. It's going to mix more with what I've got down there. The other thing is, like, using this big brush, even for little details like this, is a good thing because it forces you to think differently and not get caught up in the details too much. I will switch here pretty soon. That's partly because I'm doing more detail, and partly because I don't want to keep getting a dark color and then wiping it off and getting a light color and getting, wasting paint. You could save each brush to have a different value on it, or a different temperature at that value. Paint a lot faster that way too. So I really am trying to think of how the surface is turning around. I'm trying to think as sculpturally as possible to really understand the surface and get in there and feel it. It's the only way really to do this without reference. And even with reference, especially if it's photographic, you really need to understand what you're painting. And it's just about as important with a live model. Otherwise, lights and darks become completely abstracted, which is fine, but if you're trying to depict, light falling on an object, then it becomes more important to you what the surface is doing. I'm using the same color on the brush there because I was trying to sort of attenuate that light out. That little pile of orange stuff up there is liquid. That's just accelerating the drying time of my paint and sort of improving the flow. as I go layer